So it's going to work like this. You're going to stay on this white screen. You're going to choose the word or missing phrase from the drop down. My screen is going to look different. My screen is going to look, you can get the answers off of it. And if you want to go faster, which I doubt you will, but if you wanted to, they start on slide number 50. Okay, all right, let's begin. I'll read the first one. Number 1, it says photo editing. Definition. Photo editing refers to modifying or blank using different techniques, tools, or software. Slide. What you are going to do is you're going to look for the answer. Okay, we're going to move on to number 2. And number 2 says the second part of the definition for photo editing, which is photo editing involves applying, and then it lists a list of things that it implies. The very first one, you've got 2 options, straightening and saturation. Going back over to the slide, you need to identify them in the order that they're here on the slide. Please complete number 2. Number 3, we're going to talk about the first one in that list, and that is straightening an image. So coming over here, we're going to look at the slide, straightening an image, and we'll notice that they've already straightened this image of the tiger that's leaping through the water. And that's because the first photo must have been tilted, and now it's straight based on a level horizon line. There's also a second part to this number 3. If we don't straighten it, that means we purposely want to have a Dutch angle. There's very few instances where we would want to have a Dutch angle. Great. Now let's move on to number 4. We're going to continue to talk about how to edit a photo, primarily cropping. So coming over to the next slide. Still looking at the picture of the tiger here. Cropping is used when you want to get rid of distracting items. I don't see any distracting items in this picture of the tiger, but the second part of this question, it wants us to identify that another reason why we would crop is just to make the focal point, the tiger, the main object, which he's totally the main object here. We're going to go on to number 5, which is adjusting exposure. We see 2 pictures of the tiger this time. One of them, the tiger is very bright down here at the bottom, and the other one, well, it's dark, not enough light. So when it's too bright, obviously the shutter speed has been opened a really long time and a lot of light has entered the sensor. And this changes the overall brightness. The one at the bottom, the shutter wasn't open long enough, so not enough light got in, and that resulted in a low or dark exposure. Moving on to number 6, we're going to talk about contrast. And contrast is the scale of difference between black and white in an image. So going back, and that's what I'm going to highlight, black and white. We're going to go to the second part of contrast, which is the next slide, changing contrast. Does take me a second or two to make these clicks. Okay, so changing contrast can be done to make low contrast items or images more exciting with greater differences between colors, highlights, or shadows. Okay, we've got 3 left to go. We're about to move on to number 8, talking about saturation. You guys have cell phones and have taken photos and have manipulated this without even thinking about it. It's the concentration and intensity of a color, and it could be thought of as the purity of a color. If you have a picture with a lot of red in it, or someone's wearing a lot of red, and you lower the saturation, it'll look like they're wearing pink. If you continue to lower the saturation, it'll look like they're wearing white. So saturation is the purity of a color. And then the opposite is true. If you turn up the saturation and make the red look darker, well, then it's going to look maroon. It's going to look brown. It may eventually look black if you keep oversaturating it. Our next to the last slide, adjusting saturation. We're going to read the definition, which is adjusting saturation allows the photographer to make the images more or less colorful. It needs to be used very, and now we're going to go to the slide. The answer is carefully. If you use too much, maybe you think you're giving someone some more color, you might actually make them look sunburned. And we've got the picture of the tiger down here. There's very low saturation in the photo to the left, and then the photo to the right, they've added and they've over added saturation. Finally, our last slide. If we were in class, we would be starting Photoshop right now, and we'd be working primarily with 2 tools. One of them is called the spot healing brush. And you guys probably have some apps on your phone that does something similar to this brush, where you can go and you can basically use a magic wand and clear up a complexion, or maybe a water spot on a picture, or a tear on a picture. Another tool that we use a lot in the Adobe program called Photoshop is one where we can copy a background from a corner of the picture that looks good and then paste it on another corner of a picture that looks bad. Okay, it's called matching or proximity match. And this is the information that you need for the last slide. So these are our notes. I always give you credit for taking the notes. If you need one repeated, let me know. Everyone should make 100 on these editing notes. Okay, be careful, make sure that you're selecting the right answer, because you do see them here on our PowerPoint slides. And when you come to this very last part, of course, on your end over here, let's switch screens. Here, there we go. When you get to number 10, it's going to have that finish button that's always there. Click it, get your score, and hopefully it's 100. Take it over to your Google Classroom, attach it, mark it as done, turn it in,